Hey everyone, this is Sally from Birdwatching NC. Today I'm at Huntington Beach State Park in South Carolina to do a little birding. Let's see what we can find. The most common species of bird here I found was the anhinga. Nicknamed the snake bird, it's easy to see how they earned this moniker when watching them on the water. Unlike ducks and geese, anhingas lack the waterproofing oil found in the feathers of waterfowl. This means that after a few short dives, they quickly become waterlogged and need to dry off in the sun before they can fly again. Normally, I have to put in a bit of effort to find an anhinga, but here at the Huntington Beach State Park, they seem to be everywhere. With so many of these large birds sitting in the sun along the marshy shoreline, from a photographer's point of view, this was about as easy as it gets. Then I got really lucky when I spotted an anhinga nest filled with hungry chicks. As you can see, it was super hot outside, so the mother and little ones were panting to keep cool. These little fluff balls will fledge out of the nest at about 6 weeks old, but will stick around with mom and dad for another month after that. Although they're a little creepy looking, I still think they're kind of cute. Now here's a species I was really excited to find, the common gallinule. Although I'd seen this bird before from a distance, I'd never had the opportunity to photograph one, so as you can imagine, I was pretty stoked. These guys are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, look at that bright red bill. It was so cool to actually get to see a pair of these beauties up close and finally get a few photos of them too. Common gallinules are closely related to coots, and like coots, they spend their entire day hunting in the shallow waters of marshes and swamps for a meal. Their diet consists of leaves, stems, and seeds of various water plants, and also the fruits and berries of terrestrial plants. They're also quite fond of eating insects and spiders, earthworms, snails, and other mollusks, and tadpoles. Surprisingly, they'll also eat carrion and the eggs of other birds when they could steal them too. One of the best parts about Huntington Beach is that there is good birding to be found here throughout the day. By mid-afternoon, the tide rolled out and the birds rolled in. As it turned out, the very best time to see the greatest variety of shorebirds was around 1 p.m. as the marsh water receded, exposing a vast expanse of mudflats. I really enjoyed photographing the small birds like the short-billed dowitchers, semi-palmated plovers, and willets as they searched for a snack in the muck. Each had their own method of hunting, which was pretty neat to see. My favorite find of the flats was this clapper rail. I'd been photographing the willet when I noticed some movement in the reeds behind him. When I adjusted my focus, I instantly recognized the familiar shape of a clapper rail peeking back out at me. I was absolutely thrilled, as usually these guys are pretty tough to find given their proclivity of hiding in the tall, thick marsh grass. Why is this such a special moment for me, though? It's because this almost never happens whenever I go birding with other people. I can't tell you how many bird tours I've led where I've tried to show my guests some clapper rails without a sighting. Oh sure, we've all heard their taunting, cackling calls, laughing at us from the reeds, but to actually see one out in the open, now that is exciting. By far, one of the most entertaining species to watch was the snowy egret. These gorgeous white birds with the ridiculously yellow feet are very active hunters, constantly on the move, scanning the shallow water for a meal. Once nearly hunted to extinction for their beautiful white plumes, the number of snowy egrets has been on the rise for the past 50 years, thanks to conservation efforts. Today, they're a relatively common sight in the coastal Carolinas. Another beautiful bird here is the great egret, and yes, they are indeed great. Standing at nearly 3 feet tall with a wingspan of 5 feet, they're an impressive sight whether on the water or on the wing. I enjoyed watching this one wrestling with a shrimp, and although I wish he'd turned around for at least a second or two, it was still pretty cool to watch him wrangle his catch. Here's a sweet immature tricolored heron that I spotted preening in the sun. He was looking a little rough around the edges since he's not yet fully molted into his sleek adult plumage yet. Still, I thought he was one handsome little dude who will one day grow up to be one of the sharpest looking heron species in the Carolinas. When birding near the shallow bodies of water in the eastern Carolinas, it's hard not to stumble upon a green heron or two fishing along the shoreline. While most of the green herons will soon depart from North Carolina for warmer locales during migration, A small population appears to spend the cooler months here at Huntington Beach, so it's worth keeping an eye out for them during the winter. One of the best parts about birdwatching is the arrival of the unexpected. In this case, I ended up with a ringside seat to a battle between two American white ibises. Though it was a remarkable sight, this behavior is not unusual, as male ibises are known to be quite aggressive when defending their meals and personal space against intruders. Watching these two go after each other was crazy. They dive-bombed down like feathery darts, both ibises lunging, stabbing, and biting one another with great ferocity, often holding onto the other's head or wings with its bill, while simultaneously clawing at each other's bodies in a mid-air submission hold of avian sorts. Several times, one bird would give up, yet the other would pursue it relentlessly, dive-bombing and even chasing the weaker opponent on foot. Eventually, they called it a draw and walked away together, seemingly at peace, at least until the next meal was found. When they're not fighting, American white ibises are highly sociable birds, which is to say, for the most part, they get along just fine in a group. Despite the squabbling, they roost, nest, and feed together in large flocks throughout the year. In fact, the population of American white ibises residing in the Carolinas has actually been on the increase, which is pretty neat. White ibises are a year-round breeding resident of both states and are commonly found along our southeastern coastlines, especially in our small offshore islands. Look for them foraging and, yes, even fighting for a meal in shallow brackish and fresh water, in open marshes, and on mudflats during low tide. One of the most exciting birds to see here are the wood storks. They are the Carolinas' largest species of wader and are best found in fresh and brackish water marshes along our southeastern coastal counties. While not a common sight across both states, there are certain spots where large numbers of them gather throughout the summer. After learning that the Huntington Beach State Park was one of those special places, I was super excited at the prospect of having an opportunity to grab a few photos of these interesting birds. When I arrived early in the morning, the flock was roosting in some pine trees across the water, and I was a little disappointed that they might be too far away to photograph. As it turned out, all I needed to do was wait until afternoon because, weirdly enough, wood storks are very particular about the depth of water that they'll hunt for a meal in. Preferring no more than a foot of water to rise up against their legs, the flock actually waited until low tide before finally coming down from out of the trees to hunt in the rapidly draining marsh below. With a wingspan stretching over 5 feet in length, they were truly an epic sight to behold while gliding towards me from across the lake. One after another zoomed in, legs hanging down like the landing gear of a 747 on final approach. Surprisingly, wood storks are actually kind of graceful upon landing and are able to slow themselves down almost to a hover before gently touching down onto the water. It was thrilling to watch these large birds catching their prey. With so much action going on, I managed to photograph a nice series of pics of one trying to eat a blue crab, which was pretty cool. The bird would hold the crab in its mouth and shake its head, crunching down on the crab's shell. One by one, the crab's legs popped off until only the cephalothorax remained. Then the stork swallowed the crab whole in one gulp without so much as a pinch of Old Bay seasoning or melted butter to wash it down with. Though the temperatures were in the mid-90s with a harsh sun overhead, it was so worth sticking around throughout the afternoon for. This was definitely an experience I won't soon forget. Well, that about wraps it up from Huntington Beach State Park, South Carolina. But before I go, I simply can't wrap up a video without including a quick few snaps of a cormorant fishing. He even posed nicely for me and took a quick stroll on the mudflats just to show off. If you like this content, please subscribe to Birdwatching NC, hit that like button, ring that bell, and don't forget to visit birdwatchingnc.com. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy birding.